Hey everyone, Scott McLaughlin here. We have a full episode with me, Bridget, and Brian
You're gonna just skip
coming up.
me?
Bridget is here. Yeah, I was just about to say that. You cut off my intro, Bridget.
Right.
What
I
what
should
a
be right in the front.
what an incredible start. All right. Bridget's here. Bridget. Yeah, so we have the full episode that you'll hear right after this, but shortly after we finish recording, the Bruins announced that they've sent Mason Lohrei to Providence, which you'll hear us during the episode say that we basically expected this, thought it was coming, kind of thought Don Sweeney tipped his hand a little bit Monday at Media Day, anyways. So, not surprising, but we did want to touch on it and just give a quick reaction since it's now official. Bridget, I don't know about you, but I say this later on in this podcast as well, but I don't see any harm in sending him to Providence to start the year. He's going to play a lot of minutes there. He's going to play in all situations. Let's not forget that he's only had 8 AHL games so far. He played 5 regular season games and 3 playoff games down in Providence last spring after Ohio State's season ended. So that, and then this training camp and preseason, like that's the entirety of Mason Lohrei's pro experience to this point. He looked great in camp. This isn't about, anyone beating him out necessarily. It's about what's best for his development. And obviously the Bruins have determined that at least to start the year, this is what they think is best. And I don't really think it's worth getting up in arms about because the Bruins do have a strong D core anyways. And he's probably going to be first in line if there's any injuries or anyone struggles or anything happens.
Yeah. So like you mentioned, you will hear the rest of the podcast later where we were like, okay, it makes sense. It makes sense that because he doesn't have to clear waivers, he can go down, and they were carrying 2 extra defensemen going into today. They had Ian Mitchell as well as Mason Lohrei, and they needed to get down to just 1 extra defenseman because they also wanted 1 extra forward. And we assume the corresponding move will be to sign Dan Heinen, who was the only other forward left that they needed to make the decision on. So it makes sense that they didn't really need to carry 2 extra defensemen. They decided to keep Ian Mitchell because he doesn't have to clear waivers. He had a decent preseason as well, though I'm not sure I would categorize it as better than Mason Lohrei's preseason. In fact, in practice today, I also noticed him make some mistakes, but it's not like Poitras, right? It's not like you have to send him down and you can't bring him right back up. It's going to be fairly simple to bring him back up if someone gets injured, or if, say, all of a sudden you're a few games in, or you're 10, 12, 15 games in, or even more than that, and you're thinking maybe this was the wrong decision. Maybe Ian Mitchell wasn't the right guy to put there, or maybe Forbert or whomever you decide has fallen further in your depth chart or gotten injured. You can bring him right up. And I don't see an issue with him getting more time in Providence. Of the 3 rookies that were looking like they might make the team, I think Poitras and Beecher would be served more by being in Boston than they would by being in their respective teams, which they played at the end of last season. So I do think Mason Lohrei has the most to gain from spending time in the AHL and working on things, because he wasn't bad, but he definitely wasn't polished either. So he could work on his defending. And it's kind of no harm, no foul, though we do, all 3 of us, will speak for Brian, even though he's not here, think that he did enough really to make the team. This more has to do with a numbers thing and kind of a toss up. Like maybe he just barely didn't do enough to seal that spot over Ian Mitchell.
Yeah, I don't even know that I would call it a numbers thing necessarily, because I think that this decision comes down entirely to Mason Lohrei and what they think is best for him. And I think if they truly believed he was ready for the NHL and ready to play every night, he would be on the team and playing. I think they believe he just legitimately needs more seasoning in Providence. Like you mentioned Poitras and Beecher. Obviously, Poitras can't even go to the AHL. It's not an option for him. Beecher already had a full season in the AHL compared to just the 8 games for Lohrei. And of course, there was more of a need there. There were more openings up front. So, there's more opportunity for those guys to win jobs. And to their credit, they did. And it's not to say that Lohrei didn't do enough to win a job or whatever. It's just when you have a pretty well established top 6 of McAvoy, Grzelcyk, Lindholm, Carlo, Forbort, Shattenkirk, you feel pretty good about that. And, again, maybe 15, 20 games from now, you don't feel good about that and you decide it's Lohrei time. And that's just fine. If he's been playing well in Providence and has earned that, then great, you can make the move then. Lohrei wasn't going to be the 7th defenseman. If he was on the team, he was going to be playing every day. It would not be good for his development for him to sit on the bench and play 1 out of every 4 or 5 games. Like that was never ever going to be in the cards. So it was either you make the top 6 and you play every night in Boston, or he goes to Providence for now.
Yeah, and it gives them space because we were wondering if they were going to wait to sign Danton Heinen, which as of recording right now on Monday night, they haven't technically signed him. He was in Boston on a PTO.
You're going to jinx us again, Bridgette.
I know, we're going to have to jump on in 10 more minutes. And by the way, I had already changed into my pajamas and had to put my nice business shirt back on, and I'm not happy about it. I am wearing fluffy pants. But yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to jinx it, but
these are the rigors we go through just for you, the listeners.
Guys, look at these fluffy pants, slippers. But at the risk of ruining this podcast again, we expect Danton Heinen to make the team. So this kind of solidifies some of the other stuff that we had said before about Heinen. And so he did kind of claw his way in, right? We see some of the guys that got waived, I should say, including Boquist, and they evaluated Danton Heinen as more valuable to this team than Boquist and some of the other players that they waived. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on what you think could be his role with this team. I assume it would be not an everyday kind of player. He's going to be someone that sits and then comes in and then fills in where you need him. But what's your thoughts on them looking like they're keeping Danton Heinen here?
Yeah, I just think he's like a Swiss Army knife. He's just obviously not as a center, but as a wing. Just a versatile player who can play either side. You can play 4th line, 3rd line. In a real pinch, you can even put him in your top 6, and he's not going to score like a top 6 forward, but he's not going to look out of place. He's not going to be like a detriment that drags down a line either. So he's a really smart, responsible 2-way player that you can put out there and trust, and has a little bit of offensive pop. I mean, it was only 2 years ago he scored 18 goals, which is his career high. So, he kills penalties. He can fill in on the second power play at times. Like, you can just kind of put him anywhere and you're going to get good, solid NHL shifts out of him. So in a 13th forward, like, that's ideal. That's exactly what you want. And, we in the main pod kind of get into, what happens if like Poitras doesn't last beyond the 9 games. Well, one thing that could happen is if Geeky moves over to center, Heinen could potentially be a wing on your 3rd line. Or maybe Lauko moves up and he's a wing on your 4th line. So yeah, I think he's a better player than Boquist or Patrick Brown or any of the.
Well, what about AJ Greer is the other name that comes to mind, because they're very dissimilar players, but those 2 guys kind of seemed like they were the last 2 guys. It was going to come down to them for that extra forward role. and Greer has that grit, but you mentioned Heinen has that versatility. So thoughts on him being the last person in, beating out those guys, especially Greer?
Yeah, again, like I just think with Greer, it's we touched on this as well, but he got claimed off waivers by the Calgary Flames on Monday, so he is gone. There was just a duplication of skill set with Milan Lucic coming back, and I personally don't think you need two guys like that in your bottom six. Like it would be hard to see the two of them on a line together. There'd be a serious lack of foot speed there.
And by the way, you get that grit from Lauko too. So it's not like you don't have two players on that line that can mix it up. Lauko fights, Lauko can play physical. So when you say duplication of talents, like Lauko, I feel like Greer and Lauko are more comparable to what they could bring, and Lauko really the one that took that spot.
Yeah, Lauko has the speed on Greer, and I think more offensive upside. And I think you saw that down the stretch last year, right? Like Greer was, I mean, he was a regular in the lineup for the first half of the season and was perfectly solid for what they asked of him. But then the second half, I think you saw Lauko, sorry, bringing a little more to the table, and that's why he started playing a little bit more down the stretch.
So anything else you want to mention about this situation with Lohrei, Heinen, before we send you to the podcast that we recorded before?
Nope. This is good. On to the regular podcast.
All right.
Welcome in episode 226 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridgette and Scott McLaughlin. Bridgette and Scott, the Bruins had media day today on Monday, and we're just over 48 hours away from the start of the new 2023-2024 hockey season. So how are you guys, and how was media day today?
I'm great. Media day was good. Got the whole Bruins brass up at the dais for the press conference. Not just Montgomery and Sweeney, but also Cam Neely and Charlie Jacobs. So, some good stuff there. But clearly the theme of it all was the injection of youth, and that's sort of being part of this turning of the leaf to a new team. Don Sweeney noted that this is now the team now belongs to Brad Marchand and Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak, and obviously the supporting cast. But I think that the combination of like just the new season in general, but also now this injection of youth with Matt Poitras and Johnny Beecher making the team, and Mason Lohrei still around and making a push. We're recording this a little before the 5 p.m. roster deadline on Monday. It's possible that the Bruins do something, and we might tack something on at the end. It's also possible that they just keep the roster they have for a couple more days because they can sort of play around with the Danton Heinen PTO situation where they don't have to sign him to a contract by Monday at 5. They, in theory, could wait until Wednesday. So that they're, as we sit here recording, the roster that they had on Sunday and Monday is cap compliant. It's 22 players. They're under the salary cap. It's just a 12 forward, 8 defenseman roster, which is not what we think they'll ultimately end up at, but they can keep that together for a couple days if they want. So, like this youth movement, the push that some of these guys have made, I think it's injected some energy into the team, the locker room, the organization, certainly the fan base. I think you guys probably see it. I certainly see it on social media and, just talking to friends. It's like people are now excited to watch, Poitras especially, but also Beecher and Lohrei if he's there. And, it felt like this team in the season needed this, the little juice going in to sort of help people move past last year and actually get excited for opening night and get excited for the year.
Yeah, I would say like optimistic for sure. You feel it in the room. I mean, you could always feel a little like that energy that the guys have in the room. Like last season, it was like a very comfortable, confident energy and like kind of a mature, sure of their self kind of energy. And this one just feels a little bit different in that like, oh, it's how can we assimilate these guys? Like we're excited to see where they go, see where they fit in. Matt Poitras has become like the person everyone wants to talk to. He gets mobbed at every opportunity that he's talking to the media. But he's really deserved all of the attention he's gotten. And I'm happy they made the decision to keep Johnny Beecher over Brown. Since the last time we recorded, they waived AJ Greer, Oscar Steen, and Brown. Was there another one? Jacob Zaboral. So those guys
And
all
Jesper Boquist.
and Jesper Boquist, who I did ask Don Sweeney about. But yeah, so the two extra defensemen that you're talking about that they're keeping on the roster, Jacob Zaboral is not one of them. It's Ian Mitchell and Mason Lohrei at the moment. So Scott, I don't know if we want to jump into talking about the younger guys. There's a lot of takeaways from Media Day. Brian, if you want to jump in, but Scott and I had a chance to talk to each of the young guys. And I talked to Lucci as well. There was a lot going on. We can get into that too.
Sure. I mean, I think for me, the biggest takeaway that I had from, I don't know if it's the biggest, but it's the one that comes to my mind first, but it's just that it's officially Charlie McAvoy and David Pasternak's team. And they were asked about that. And the biggest quote for me is McAvoy, and he was just very thoughtful and trying to give an honest answer. But he basically mentioned how something that he's trying to internalize in his own mind going forward and right now is like, what is his legacy going to be with the Boston Bruins and along with David Pastrnak? Like, what is their era? Because the guys before them that they've learned from, they had one. And, you know, we could talk about shortcomings in 2013, 2019, but the fact of the matter is they did win a Stanley Cup in 2011. They got to the top of the mountain. That's all gone now. And so Marchand remains, of course, but how will the Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak era be remembered as 6, 8, 10 years from now? And the players are cognizant of that question, and here they are with an opportunity to write that story before it's written, obviously.
Yeah, and along those same lines, I was in on David Pasternak's scrum, and you know, obviously he's coming off an unbelievable season, 61 goals, second in MVP voting. He signs the biggest contract in Bruins history in March. You know, an 8-year extension that kicks in this year, keeps him with the team through 2031. And he was asked, you know, what motivates you after a year like that? And he said, it's very simple. It's a championship. I want to bring the championship back to Boston. This has been my big motivation since I got in this league. I'm starting my 10th season here in Boston, so it's time. That's definitely the motivation to win the championship above anything else. And that's, you know, that's something he's been pretty consistent about. Like he talked about that last year. He talked about it after he signed the extension. At the end of the season, you know, on breakup day, you could tell how devastated he was for them to have, you know, blown that opportunity that they had with the team that they had last year. And, you know, there's certain people who want to paint Pastrnak as somehow selfish or only cares about stats or whatever. And I've never gotten that impression from him. I think that generally comes from people who don't know him and quite frankly, like don't pay much attention outside of, you know, highlights of his goals. But yeah, I mean, he sounds genuine. And like you mentioned with McAvoy, like I think it's the same thing where it's, yeah, I think it is starting to hit these guys. Like it's their team, their franchise now. And, you know, McAvoy's now in year 2 of a massive extension, Pastrnak in year 1. And it's like, this is their prime. This is their big contracts. This is, you know, what they're ultimately going to be judged on. So Yeah, I think you hear two guys who want to keep raising their level and raise the team's level as well. And obviously, everyone knows this is not the same team as last year. Everyone knows they don't have the same depth and all that. But I get the sense, like, and some guys have even said it, is there's still a quiet confidence that this is a team that can win a lot, that expects to win a lot, that expects to be a playoff team, that saw last year that all you have to do is get into the playoffs and you have a chance. So, none of them are expecting to have 130, whatever, 40 points again. None of them are expecting 65 wins, but, I think there's still a pretty high level of confidence that this can be a good team, at least, in the building, whether fans are buying in or not, very much up in the air.
Yeah, and there's a few guys I want to add to that core because we're talking, and this is going to be a talking point throughout the season. Jake DeBrusk would probably go in that category of the core. With this is their era with Pasternak and McAvoy. Brendan Carlo, Hampus Lindholm, who just signed a longer contract. So these are some guys that are kind of in their prime and in these big contracts that they signed with the Bruins, except for DeBrusk, who's up for his contract. And Sweeney was asked about it. He said they're in ongoing conversations. He really didn't add any new information to that situation. But, that's just something on the horizon. And it's funny because Jake DeBrusk, who, we've kind of thought as one of the younger guys on the team, now is realizing that he's teaching the 19-year-old kids. Like he's like, he said to you, Scott, today, I'm starting to feel old because now I'm the guy that people are asking questions to, and I'm not the guy that's asking the questions. So that group, he's part of the core as well. And he's going to be an important player for them this season. He obviously had a great season last year, but because of the changes in the lineup, because of no Bergeron, no Krejci, his scoring is going to be relied upon more. And he seems pretty confident. He said he was ready for the season, felt like he ramped up and is ready to go.
So, I mean, I feel personally that the Matt Poitras story is first and foremost the number one out of camp. Johnny Beecher's right there. And a lot of questions were directed towards management, just about. Well, I think somebody asked Sweeney about if he was on the Bruins when Bergeron came in. It was talked about David Pastrnak coming in as a teenager, and I just think, like, the Bruins, they think that tampering expectations is something that they believe in with young players coming into the league, and I guess should we tamper? What are these expectations? I mean, what are your guys' expectations for Matt Poitras? I mean, first and foremost, starts with the 9-game sample size. I don't know if anybody's really labeled a ton of expectations on him to really tamper down. I just think there's a general excitement that maybe Sweeney was referring to. I mean, I personally don't think he's like gonna necessarily win the Calder Trophy and score 60 points. I just think that he's a
Look
fresh
out, Connor Bedard.
Yeah, seriously. I just think that he I think he's going to come in and add some youth and some offense, but I don't think anybody's sitting here projecting a Calder Trophy. So it's one of those things when you hear Sweeney say that it's kind of annoying. It's like he's just playing politician, and he's doing what he's supposed to do, I suppose. Like, not trying to put too much pressure on the kid, but I don't think people put that much pressure on him. They're just excited that he's been playing well.
I think you're right, but I also think part of like Sweeney saying that is in response to something Bridgette mentioned, which is, Poitras is just getting like swarmed by media every time he's available, every time he's in the locker room. He's getting podcast requests from your certain favorite local Bruins podcast. But yeah, so I think it might be just a response to that as much as anything. And
I
You know,
did
that
ask
they're
him, by the way, I did ask him today if he's becoming more comfortable with being swarmed by everyone, and he said he was fine with it. I said he seems to be taking it well. It's funny because I saw him. Elaine was shooting a video that went onto the Bruins Instagram, and he's kind of like covering his face, like he didn't want to be on camera, but really he seems to be okay dealing with the media. He told me he wasn't uncomfortable, so I guess he's gonna have to get used to it because especially if he continues to play well, the cameras are gonna be all over him. He's all of a sudden people are gonna know what he looks like and see him out on the town, and his life is changing.
Yeah, and I think you can see even just from like the start of camp until now that he's getting more comfortable with that, and he's getting more comfortable with his teammates. Like as you saw at practice today, so they practice at the Garden as part of media day, and they do like a 2-on-2 center ice drill, and Brad Marchand turned Poitras inside out and then scored a nice goal, and you saw like Poitras just like throw his head back and laugh, and Marchand kind of like slashed him on the on the shin pads on his way by. There's like as as the media was leaving the locker room, there was an equipment guy sitting next to Poitras, and they were like talking, and the equipment guy goes, "Yeah, I'm just waiting for you to take your jersey off, like so we can throw it in the bin." And Poitras's like, "Oh, I thought you just wanted to spend some quality time with me." So
That was
like,
pretty funny. I did think that. I heard that as we were walking out, and I was like, that's a good one. That was a good comeback."
yeah, so you see him getting more comfortable, but yeah, I mean, as far as my expectations for him, it, I think it's wide open. Like I'm personally not putting any on him because I know Bridgette's been adamant on here. She thinks he's NHL ready. She thinks he's sticking around. Um, I've said like I'll give him the 9 games, and I want to see how those look. Like it's possible that it turns out he just has more to work on, and another year in juniors could do him good. I am increasingly leaning towards him sticking around beyond the 9 games, but let him play those games first and then see where you're at. So, yeah, I don't have any sort of set like, well, he needs to have 5 points in those 9 games or whatever. No, like just play good hockey, play the way he's been playing, uh, keep working that hard on and off the puck, and the results will follow. And make his line mates better. I think I thought in practice today there were a couple of times where you continue to see growing chemistry between him, Frederick, and Geeky. They had a really nice it was like a 3-on-2 rush drill, really nice tic-tac-toe goal. So like just keep doing what he's doing. Obviously, don't let up just because you made the opening night roster. But don't think you have to do something above and beyond what you're already doing either. So my expectations for him are right now sort of just limited to this 9 games. Just play good hockey and then go from there. I'm not gonna sit here and say like, oh, I think he'll have 40 points or whatever. Like, I don't know. Maybe after the 9 games, I'll have a better feel.
He also got some time playing with DeBrusque, but that was like power play rushes. But I also would be happy to see him play next to Marchand and DeBrusque, which they have worked on a little bit. You're talking about making chemistry on that third line. Maybe we see him on the second line at some point during those 9 days, the 9-day trial. I mean, you know what my expectations are. I expect him to make the team, stay on the team. I said that for a week or so. I don't know how long it's been. I just feel like even if he doesn't put up huge numbers in the first 9 games of the season, you're still going to see those flashes of upside. That's going to make you not want to put him down and just let him weather the storm a little bit. If he doesn't look good sometimes, shows flashes, he's like you mentioned, you can't put super high expectations on him. Just let him fight through it. And if you're judging and predicting off of stuff we've already seen, then you have to think he's going to make the team after 9 games. If we're basing it off of what we've seen from him in the preseason and the upside that we've seen and what he can bring, I also think that they don't have a better option than him, right? So like, why take him off the team after 9 games if he's your best option in that position. It doesn't make sense to me at all. So I expect him to stick, not just for the 9 games, for the rest of the season. Hopefully, if he's able to compete at the level we saw him compete in preseason.
Yeah, that's a great point. He's also, as you mentioned, it's not like he's beating out Charlie Coyle of last year, where Charlie Coyle is the third center and Poitras comes into camp and takes his spot. He's not taking anybody's established role right now as a third line center. So, and yeah, I think his upside is significantly higher than what the other options that they have at center in the, for that third line. I think that my expectations for him is that he's going to help this hockey team. He's going to be a net positive for them. Is that going to be him putting up 25 to 30 points? Is it going to be him putting up, 40 to 50? I don't know. I'll tell you this, from what I've seen in preseason, I don't think he's a flash in the pan. Oftentimes you'll see a player impress in training camp, but there's just something to the eye test where you're like, I just don't think I think it's more fortune than anything else. It's good timing. He's playing against a mix of AHL and NHL. But Poitras, his hands, his vision, and his hockey IQ alone, I think, is already where it needs to be to get a start in the NHL. So my expectations are he's going to help this hockey team. I don't want to put a finite, prediction together, but I do think he's going to help the team in more ways than he won't.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, like what really stands out, versus other young players is that poise. It's just how confident he looks with the puck on his stick, how he sees the ice, how he reads plays. Because, if someone comes in and they blow you away with their speed or, some sick dangles or an incredible shot, like those are easy to see. You know exactly what that is. And like you see stuff like that, and then it's like, okay, well, does he also think the game at an NHL level? With Poitras, it's like you can see that he already thinks the game at an NHL level. And guys like that, like you don't need all that other stuff to be elite in order to be a good NHL player. Like you don't need the Connor McDavid or even Fabian Lysell speed. You don't need a David Pastrnak shot. Like if you have that poise, that confidence, that vision, as you said, hockey IQ, like you have a leg up on a lot of younger players. So that's what really stands out. While we're here, just on the topic of depth or like what would be behind Poitras if, say they do end up sending him back. Danton, as we touched on, Danton Heinen's still around. He has not yet signed a contract, but he was at practice Monday. It certainly seems like the plan is for him to sign a contract. Maybe that even happens before we log off this podcast. We'll see. But after that, of all the guys they waived, everyone except AJ Greer cleared. So AJ Greer got claimed off waivers by the Calgary Flames on Monday. And, the irony there is Greer grew up a big fan of Milan Lucic, watching Lucic. It's Lucic's return to Boston that basically spells Greer's end because, they have similar skill sets, bring similar things to the table. So Greer gets waived. He ends up getting claimed by the Flames, who were probably looking for bottom 6 toughness because they moved on from, guess who? Milan Lucic. So
such a weird dynamic going on there. Like it's almost like a sad, like a tragedy. Like it's a little bit tragic. Like I wonder, I mean, obviously Greer probably wants to play on an NHL roster. Does he want it to be in Calgary? Would he have rather cleared waivers, stuck around in Providence for a little until he got called up? The Bruins obviously would have rather him cleared and be an option for them, but he's no longer an option. It is just kind of a little bit strange with the multiple Lucci connections with that.
Yeah. So, but Jesper Boquist is still an option. Oscar Steen is still around. Patrick Brown. And then obviously even beyond that, the non-waiver guys like Mark McLaughlin or a Georgi Merkulov or, on and on. So,
Or sliding Geeky over. I mean, not Geeky. Sliding Geeky over.
yeah,
Sliding someone else that's making the Boston lineup to center, Frederick or Geeky.
yeah, I guess that's where I should have started. But yeah, Geeky would be the one to slide over and be third line center if Poitras doesn't stick. So that's kind of where the roster is. Don Sweeney didn't really tip his hand when it comes to the defense. Basically said like he has an idea what they're going, because if they sign Heinen, they have to, send down a defenseman, either Lohrei, who obviously doesn't need waivers, or Ian Mitchell, who does need waivers, or maybe trade someone away, which, it's kind of tough to pull off trades this close to the season, but it's an option. So, Sweeney he said they have an idea what they're going to do, but Mason Lohrei has made it a difficult decision, which I sort of read into that as like they're probably still leaning towards having Lohrei start in Providence, but they're very clearly giving long, serious thought to him breaking camp with the Bruins and being on the opening night roster.
Yeah, I think when Don Sweeney mentioned how two young guys were pushing in Poitras and Johnny Beecher in the press conference, he didn't initially mention Lohrei's name, and I think it was just an unintentional way of him kind of tipping his hand there, where I think he mentioned Poitras and Beecher because they're going to have those opening night spots.
I also think in context, he was kind of more being asked about the forward group in different situations. So like when he gave an answer about Poitras and Beecher to one of my questions, but it was pertaining to, what led to his decision to waive Jesper Boquist. And he mostly said, Beecher and Poitras had such good camps. Like that's why Boquist didn't end up making the team. So I think a lot of that was in context with questions about the offense or questions specifically about Poitras that he also just like looped Beecher into. So I don't know how much there is to read into it. But Scott did talk to, well, I did too, but Mason Lohrei in the locker room after, and Scott, you totally went to burst his bubble. You're like, what are you gonna do if you don't make the team? And he was just like, I don't want to think about that.
Yeah, well, I tried to find like a way to ask that without sounding like a jerk, but like I am curious because obviously there's gonna be disappointment if he doesn't make the NHL roster to start. But I wanted, basically what I was getting at is like I wanted to know, how do you sort of build off what's clearly been a strong camp in preseason if you have to deal with like that disappointment of starting in Providence. And I get obviously like he doesn't want to think about that, but he certainly said all the right things today, and it is hard for some of those guys because they haven't gotten the definitive answer yet. Like even Beecher said that when I was talking to him. He's like, someone asked him like, have you been given the definitive word? And he said, no, not yet. And it's like, obviously they all, can look at the roster and who's been sent down and draw pretty safe conclusions. But until someone tells you, yeah, you're on the opening night roster, it's not official. So, and in Lohrei's case, it's even, there's even more uncertainty because that is somewhere where at some point they do have to make another move. So
yeah, the fact that Ian Mitchell and him are there as extra defensemen, it's kind of, it definitely makes the dynamic different. It was a little bit weird. I mean, I wish they did media day after the final decision on Cuss, because it did kind of feel like we were kind of tiptoeing around, asking questions a certain way, not being super definitive with guys like Beecher and Lohrei. But also I would really love to ask, like, to talk to Don Sweeney after the final roster and just ask him, say Lohrei doesn't make it, what was the decision? How come Lohrei went down? What's the thought process? Those are questions we'd like to ask him. We do not, I mean, as far as I know, we don't know the next time we're going to talk to Don Sweeney. So could be a while from now. He doesn't speak to us very much. So we got some of the answers we wanted, but those things are still up in the air. So those are things we haven't had a chance to ask him about, obviously.
And maybe there's a method to their madness there. Maybe they want to dodge a couple of potential questions. But I think I want Lohrei on the team. I think that if I had to wager a guess, I feel like he might start in Providence simply to just play every game for a little bit. Do I agree with it? I don't know. No, I'd rather him over Forbert. But will they make that decision and have that conversation with Forbert and like what they want to deal with, not having him on the roster right now? I don't know. I really don't know. So when Don Sweeney says he thinks he has an idea of who their top 6 is going to be to start, I think it's safe to assume, it's their top 4 from last year, and then Forbert and Shattenkirk. But I could be wrong. What I am pleased about is the fact that there were some line combinations before Patrick Brown was waived and a couple other players that had Johnny Beecher on the 5th line in the depth chart. And it was one of those situations where it's like Patrick Brown has done nothing as far as his performance on the ice this preseason to merit a 4th line center role over Johnny Beecher. And it was like, here we go again, because the Bruins talk about in a press conference today, they say, we're usually pretty consistent about giving a young kid an opportunity when we think they can help us. And I'm just like, all right. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily always true, but okay, I'll go with you on it. And but in this situation, their actions backed up those words when they did waive Patrick Brown and with all the intentions of saying, hey, Johnny Beecher's going to get that first, like a 4th line center.
Yeah, and Jesper Boquist was a guy they did not expect to waive, but because of those guys surprising them in the preseason, he ended up as one of the odd men out. And that's how they're really, like, this year we're staying true to their word that they told the younger guys that if they worked hard and they beat guys out that they would get the spot, because Boquist was someone that they liked and targeted as a free agent, thought he had a spot, and then had to make the tough choice and have a tough conversation with him a few days ago about not being part of the team. So yeah, I think they really were true to their word this year. I mean, but also basically they didn't have much option besides to choose those guys because from what we saw, that's what makes the team the better team, right? Like your team is a better team with those 2 guys. And there's no loyalty to someone like Boquist, who first of all wasn't with Boston last year, never got into an NHL game with Boston. So not yet, at least, because maybe later on in the season at some point. But yeah, they make your team a better team, so you have to put them in.
Yeah, and it certainly this year, like Sweeney has allowed it to be truly open competition. They wind up waiving 2 guys that he signed as a free agent. Like that's not ideal for any general manager. And I don't mean because it reflects poorly on the move or whatever, because ultimately waiving Patrick Brown and Jesper Boquist costs you no extra money. Like, I mean, because they're one-way contracts, you're still paying them cash-wise, you're still paying them the same, even if they're in Providence. But in terms of, cap space or whatever, like you bury the whole contract. There's nothing that stays on the NHL books. But yeah, like day 1 of free agency, they signed Patrick Brown to a 2-year deal. Clearly, the idea was he might be the 4th line center, the Tomas Nosek replacement. They signed Jesper Boquist as a free agent when Danton Heinen was also still a free agent. And so there could be like a temptation if you're the GM there to say, well, let's kind of give some preference to the guys I went out and signed. But in the end, yeah, they went with the guys who just played better. So I think you have to give them credit there. And I know there's going to be criticism if Lohrei doesn't start the season in the NHL. I just feel like that won't be as justified as criticism had they kept, say, Brown over Beecher, which I think would have been pretty fair criticism. In this case, like, you already have an NHL D core that, anyway you look at it, and unless you're like one of these massive haters who thinks every Bruins defenseman sucks except for McAvoy, I think anyone looking at it objectively believes this is one of the best D cores in the NHL. It should be. So if you start the season with sort of the veteran group that we expect, and Lohrei plays 10, 15, 20 games in Providence, if he does well, and if someone struggles or there's an injury, he's going to get called up, and he might never look back once he does. So I don't think there's a whole lot of harm in starting him in Providence. But if he does start in the NHL, then that's just kind of another bold move and turn to youth. And like I would certainly give him credit for that as well.
So Bridgette just disappeared, but little Houdini trick there. But Scott, I feel like I agree with you on that front. There is definitely less of a demand right now to crack into that top six on the NHL roster on D than there is for certain spots up front. As it pertains to expectations, and I know Bridgette, we're gonna have to wait for her to kind of come back onto the set here, but maybe we start to transition over to our expectations for the Bruins team this year. I mean, yeah, there's a couple of minor personnel decisions still to be made, but by and large, we know what this team is going to be going into the season and how they stack up against the rest of the league. Bridgette's back, so I think we're probably good. Bridgette, thumbs up if you're back.
I have no idea what just happened. But it's par for the course. How was my face frozen on a really weird face? Like,
no,
it went totally black.
Oh, good. That's so par for the course. On laptop number 4.
I was gonna say I just removed you from the screen because you cut me off, but that is not actually what happened.
No, my whole screen went black. My light turned off. 1 second. Everything went to shit. So
well, there you go. Yeah, Bridgette's had more laptops than the Bruins have had centers heading into the season. So
a lot of transactions, a lot of roster movement, a lot of transactions. Yeah. Corporate finally, I got my laptop from corporate. Hopefully that comes in clutch. But anyway, where were we?
Like the Bruins, her new Odyssey laptop's also 19 years old, so
it probably is, honestly.
So
just kidding, Odyssey, we love you.
They have been actually really helpful. I've been calling this poor IT guy, and he actually just called me while we were doing the podcast, so I'm gonna call him back later. But sorry, I completely rudely interrupted this by my laptop crapping out. So there was a few more things I want to say about Poitras if we're wrapping up with this conversation, or
yeah, sure. You can get last word, and then we'll go to start talking about predictions and whatnot.
Okay. Also, 1 minute till the deadline. Just saying. So I have been scrolling Twitter. So just a few fun things that we learned about Poitras today, because obviously we're kind of just getting to know him. People probably don't know what his face looks like yet, unless you've been really hardcore following preseason. So he's going to keep the number 51. It was assigned to him, but he said it also has family significance. He kind of seemed like he didn't want to say what it was, so we don't know what the family significance was, but he's keeping number 51. He doesn't know where he's staying yet. He doesn't know if he'll be in a hotel, apartment, whatever. He's not settled into Boston yet, still figuring that out. And someone asked him, like, is it going to be weird, like, living by yourself and cooking? And he's like, yeah. He said he can't cook. And he said, I can do stuff that has instructions on the box, but that's about it. So he's going to work on his cooking. His favorite player growing up, I don't know if either of you saw the answer to this, because I did tweet it, but Brian, have you seen what his answer was? If not, do you want to guess who his favorite player was growing up?
I did not see it. As far as a guess, I know he grew up in Toronto, so maybe Austin Matthews or someone like that.
I've I've heard him before say he models his game after Braden Point, so I'll guess that.
It was Jonathan Toews.
Okay.
And he also threw Mitch Marner in there as someone that he watches now and likes how he plays now. But it was Jonathan Toews, which makes sense. Like when he was growing up, Chicago was really good, and Jonathan Toews was a great center for them at that time. So Jonathan Toews, and then he also told us that his entire family will be in attendance on Wednesday for his NHL debut. His older brother, younger sister, mom, dad, and hopefully his grandparents, he said, will be there. So there's just a little bit of like information about him as a person and kind of just filling in a little bit of the character and the color around him. He's not just, now that we're going to be around him a lot and people are going to want to know about him as much as they can.
All right. So Scott, do you want to head over to the predictions now?
Sure. All right. I mean, do we want to start Bruins where we think they're going to finish? Or I guess we might as well, right?
I would just do the Atlantic, right? And people will know based upon that where we think.
Yeah. So, I mean, for starters, I think the Atlantic Division is going to be fascinating this season because there are so many questions, so many wild cards. Like, I think most people expect Toronto to be the top team. And I will just say off the top, they are also my pick to win the division. They still have the stacked forward group. I think they've gotten better defensively. Obviously, there's still questions. Well, let me say that they've gotten better defensively the last couple of years, and now I wonder if they've taken a step back again this year because their big addition on the back end was John Klingberg, who cannot play defense. So I could actually see them struggling defensively again. But I do like their forward core. Ilya Samsonov obviously had a very good season last year, better than a lot of people anticipated in goals. So just overall, they're probably the team with the fewest question marks. And whatever you think of, what they can and can't do in the playoffs, regular season, they should be good. I have the Bruins second, and maybe that's bias. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little too caught up in some of the optimism that's, kind of been there throughout this camp, but I see a team that is still very strong defensively, should still have the best or one of the best goaltending duos, and still has good offensive pieces, even though there are obviously questions at center, but you still have David Pastrnak, you still have Brad Marchand. There is some youth now being added to this group that could help. And after that, like Florida Panthers obviously went on an amazing run. They start the season with Aaron Ekblad and Brendan Montour on injured reserve, and that could be like up to 2 months. So that's a pretty significant chunk. I did not like what they did to address their defense this offseason. It seemed like more of a quantity over quality approach. And I thought they probably needed to upgrade their defense even with Ekblad and Montour in there. And I don't think they did. Obviously, they remain a very deep team offensively. Tampa Bay lost a lot of depth, lost Alex Killorn, lost basically their entire fourth line. Andrei Vasilevsky out at least 2 months after surgery. Huge questions in goal to start the season. I honestly could see them being a fringe playoff team, being like on the bubble. There's still the very high end talent of Kucherov, Point, Hedman, Mikhail Sergachev's a player I really like. Stamkos still very good, even if he's not in his prime anymore. Brandon Hagel's a good player. Like, there's still stuff to like there, but there's definitely more questions with the Lightning than usual. And then, after that, like, look, Sabres just missed the play, or, we're pretty close to making a playoff push last year, scored a ton of goals, had to address defense and goaltending. Obviously, they hope Northeastern product Devin Levi can be the answer in goal. Not sure they fully addressed their defense with all due respect to Connor Clifton and Eric Johnson. I think those are more third pairing guys when they really need a top 4 guy. But, they could certainly make a push. And then we, kind of round out the division from there. I think Senators could surprise. Red Wings could be better. Canadians probably going to be pretty bad again.
Guys, don't worry, I got it.
Bridgette was teed up to go next, and then her mic went down again.
No, it was just other things freezing. But so Scott kind of, there's a lot of similarities. Toronto 1, Bruins 2, for me as well. And then I had Sabres 3rd because first of all, everybody knows Connor Clifton's going to put them over the top. They're going to be a playoff team this year because of Connor Clifton. Just kidding. But I do believe that Devin Levi can have an impact on them. I think that they really were hungry for it last year and fell just short. I think their rebuild has gone far enough that they're a playoff team. I had them in the 3rd spot. However, they could be a wild card team. Metro, I had Hurricanes, Devils, Rangers, but then my main thing was I didn't know, like, my expectations for the Penguins are all over the place. So I didn't know where to put the Penguins. And I actually just ended up putting them outside of the playoffs. Kind of maybe something like last season. They add Carlson, so theoretically they should be better, and be a playoff team. But I just didn't know where to put them. Like, are they better than the Lightning? Are they better than Florida, or are they better than Buffalo? They have to be better than one of those teams in order to make the playoffs this year. So that was kind of the one team I wasn't so sure about. And to go to the Bruins in the number 2 spot, like Scott said, we're very optimistic. I don't know if it's just because of where we are. But I did take a look at where other reporters across the league, the NHL, put out had 15 or so of their reporters put out their predictions, and a lot of people had the Bruins in that 2nd slot. There were only 2 out of, say 10 to 15 reporters that had the Bruins missing the playoffs. So they were a playoff team for most people. And because of the things that Scott listed about the Lightning and the Panthers, I still think they finish above those teams. And I think the Sabres will make the playoffs, but I don't see them being better than the Bruins or Toronto. So that's why I have those 2 as the top 2 teams in the Atlantic.
All right. I mean, Bridgette, I respect you putting the Sabres on the map, and I'll tell you something. I'm looking at the same map that you are. I also think that the Sabres are going to make the playoffs this year. I think for me the Atlantic is Toronto, and then Boston, and then I do have the Sabres making the playoffs, being the 3rd team in the Atlantic Division, which even people who think the Sabres will make the playoffs might have them in a wild card, right? But I don't know. I just think they've just been knocking on the door for a while, and it's a combination of that. And yes, like Tampa Bay, they've had some turnover. They still have the key guys in place, but they also don't have Vasilevsky, as we've mentioned. So that, to me, and even when he comes back, is he going to be healthy? I mean, back injuries are problematic for sure, especially at the goaltending position. So to me, Tampa Bay they're not a lock to make the playoffs because goaltending is really important. And I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know much about their replacement for Vasilevsky and their ability. So, but
I'm not sure they know a lot about it either, to be honest.
Okay, so it's not just me not doing my homework. Okay, good. So yeah, I think so for me, but I do. Okay, so I'll just reiterate. So for me, the Atlantic is Toronto, Boston, Buffalo. The Metro, I have the Hurricanes, then the Devils, and the Rangers. I was inclined to put the Rangers into the wild card, but I just like their defense better than Pittsburgh's. And then the wild card, I do have Tampa in the wild card because until they don't make the playoffs, I can't have them miss the playoffs. They've earned that. So for me, there you go. We got a fourth host on the podcast. Bridgette, what's that cat's name?
Xerxes.
That's right. That's right.
Usually it's the others, but today it's Xerxes.
And then so for the wild card, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning and then the Penguins in the 2-hole. And so for me the snub is the Panthers. I don't see a whole lot there outside of Matthew Tkachuk, and it's like, I mean, I don't know. There is. I mean, Barkov is obviously great. Verhaeghe's good. Tkachuk is great. Ekblad's good. Montour's good.
He's gonna wait. He's eating my microphone cord. I don't need this, Xerxes. I already have enough.
This is why none of Bridgette's technology works. It's all been eaten by cats.
He's sitting here eating my mic cord. Xerxes.
So I have the Panthers as my playoff snub, I guess, if you want to label one. And then if we're doing, do we do the dark horse and the regular? Are we saving that for next?
I guess since I didn't do my Metro, I should just go through that quick. So I have the same order as you guys. Hurricanes winning the Metro, Devils second, Rangers third, and then I have Penguins and Lightning as my 2 wild cards. So I have Buffalo out. As I said, I think they're asking a lot of Devin Levi, who I really like and think was excellent at Northeastern. But they did not improve their team defense as much as I think they needed to. Now, look, maybe just having the goalie is enough to get them into the playoffs. But, I also think their bottom 6, I don't think is all that strong. Certainly the high-end talents are there with Tage Thompson, Alex Tuch, Jeff Skinner had a huge bounce-back year. Dylan Cousins I really like. Dahlin and Owen Power on the blue line, which, by the way, we should mention Buffalo just signed Rasmus Dahlin to an 8-year, $88 million extension. So he's now one of 3 defensemen in the NHL making at least $11 million, along with Erik Karlsson and Drew Doughty. So sort of, and obviously those are older contracts signed a while ago. So kind of resets the market a bit for the new wave of young stud defensemen. And the reason I bring it up is because I think that makes Charlie McAvoy being locked in at $9.5 million through the end of the decade. That's just going to look better and better by the year as more defensemen end up in that $11 million range, and someone's going to push to 12 or 13 at some point. So I absolutely could see the Sabres making the playoffs, but I have them just outside right now.
Yeah, the dark horse team. Okay, I didn't pick someone that's like very much at the bottom, like supposed to be close to finishing last. I picked the Sabres as a dark horse team, as in like if the meaning is to make a run beyond what people expected. So that's like more of a playoff thing. Like if they make it in, can they make a run? And also people don't expect them to make it in the first place. So I took it as someone that's going to go above expectations, surprise people, and kind of reemerge from where the Sabres have been, which was kind of being laughed at for a while. Sabres jokes were running rampant for a few seasons. They've gone away. Tage Thompson, Jeff Skinner have really kind of brought the team back to being in contention, and things are looking up after they spent a lot of time in the basement. So I say they're the dark horse just because I think they're going to go above expectations, and they're going to go above what they've been in the past, say 5, 6. How many seasons has it been since they made the playoffs? It's been a while.
I think it's been since like 2009 or 10 when the Bruins beat them.
It's been since the era where Milan Lucic killed Ryan Miller. Gotta go all the way back to that era. Yeah, was it the year that the Bruins knocked them out?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was the year of Miro the Hero and Dennis Weidman and Michael Ryder kind of putting them out of misery in Game 6 in Boston. I mean, I guess my dark horse would be. I put down that my dark horse was the Calgary Flames. But if like league wide, I think Calgary, with a new lease on life with Sutter gone, I think Jonathan Huberdeau should have a resurgence. Kadri in a second year in Calgary. I just think there's a lot of ground that they can make up. I think they underperformed last year. But if we're keeping it to the Eastern Conference, I do like the Senators as a dark horse. Scott, you mentioned them. People talk about the Sabres, myself and Bridgette, Senators, Scott. I also think the Red Wings are like, they're on the ascend too. I think their direction is a little bit less clear right now than it may have been a couple of years ago. Tyler Bertuzzi was supposed to be a part of that, I feel like. But they've signed some good guys in the offseason, JT Compher, and their roster is pretty decent. I don't expect them to do very much. But if I were to pick a dark horse in the East, maybe Detroit. Another fun dark horse, but it's like and when I say dark horse, it's about making the playoffs, right? This dark horse is like not necessarily to make the playoffs, but to be a competitive team, which otherwise wouldn't be, would be Chicago. I mean, Connor Bedard can like potentially, increase that team's production by like 20 points this year.
Taylor Hall's on the team this year.
And Fliggy.
Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno.
And don't forget Fliggy. Yeah, so I just think like Chicago's going to be must watch. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see because like Chicago would literally be a cellar dweller again, a last place team by far without Connor Bedard's presence this year. So I'm interested to see just how much one player can impact that previous.
Well, we get to see them first day, Wednesday, opening night. Connor Bedard will be at the Garden.
I was going to say, don't forget about a couple other Bruins legends on that team, Ryan Donato and Jared Tenorti, of course. I think the Blackhawks are still going to be bad. I mean, it would be really impressive if Connor Bedard drags that team anywhere close to the playoffs. Because, we'll see it Wednesday, but it's like they basically gave Connor Bedard pretty good line mates and, defensemen for his 5-on-5 shifts. And then the rest of that roster still sucks, quite frankly. There is not a lot there, but we'll see.
But that's why I'm saying, I think it's going to be kind of fun to see just how far, not far, but how much less worse he can make them.
Yeah. By the way, the Sabres did make the playoffs the year after the Bruins knocked them out too. 2011.
Lost to the Flyers, right?
Yeah, they lost to the Flyers in 7 games, and then the Bruins, of course, swept the Flyers. My dark horse, so I guess kind of 2 different levels. My dark horse of a team that I think most people have in the playoffs that I could see going on a deep, maybe a little bit of an unexpected deep run would be the Los Angeles Kings. I really liked them aggressively going out and getting Pierre-Luc Dubois this offseason. I think now gives them really tremendous center depth with Dubois, Andrei Kopitar, and Philip Danault, as their top 3 guys. Still some pretty good defensemen there. Goaltending is a question mark. That's going to be the huge wild card. Last year they had to trade for Korpisalo, and he was solid for them, but he's gone now, so it's Phoenix Copley and Cam Talbot. And then in the East, Brian, you mentioned it, but it would be Ottawa for me as a team that's, probably projected to not make the playoffs that I could see making a run. I like that young talent up front with Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, Drake Batherson. Obviously, veteran Giroux. They add Vladimir Tarasenko. That's a pretty good group. And then on defense, they went out and traded for Chychrun to add to Shabbat. You got Jake Sanderson now in his 2nd year. There's some really promising pieces there. I don't know if this is going to be the year that they, put it all together and break through, but definitely wouldn't shock me if they do. Do we want to, since I know we have to.
I'm sorry, I was trying to say something, but once again, my thing would not unmute itself. So I don't think I picked my last place. I haven't said my last place team yet. But I do think Chicago's not going to do as well as Brian thinks. The Sharks are not good.
Whoa. You can't say that and get away with it. I never said Chicago was going to do good. All I said was I want to see.
You said dark horse, they're not going to be as bad as
I just meant how much better can he make them than what would be a last place team, which they very well may be. I just want to see the Connor Bedard effect, what it does.
Or ask yourself, how much better could they be if they tanked and got another number 1 overall pick? That's what I was thinking.
That is true, but
Ask yourself,
I
how
also
many
didn't
games
realize
do they really want to win?
that's true, but I also didn't realize, like Scott said, that they have Jared Tenorti, so maybe the cup is back on for Chicago.
So I'm picking the Sharks. Honorable mentions: Ducks and Canadians and Blackhawks.
Yeah, it's the Sharks for me for worst record. That team is going to be so bad. And they might end up trading a Tomas Hertl, Logan Couture, like the few veterans they actually have left. But yeah, it's did the Athletic put out like their one big question for each team, and the question for the Sharks was literally like, will this be the worst defense in the modern era? Like there's just nothing on that team's blue line. So yeah, tough going for San Jose. But yeah, I mean Anaheim probably still not going to be very good. Montreal, as we said, Columbus, I don't see making too much of a jump, although they do have some promising young pieces. But yeah, I got to go with Sharks.
By the way, my last year's dark horse, just to throw myself, under the bus, was Columbus. That take did not age well. So I'm not picking them again. So yeah, I don't think they're making the playoffs.
Yeah, they had some bad injuries last year too that didn't help them. I can see them getting better this year with another year of Gaudreau and Laine. Can Laine ever have a resurgence and better health? And then the second overall pick, what was it, Fantilli or something like that. So I mean, obviously, he'd be a good addition too. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I also think the Sharks are going to be dead last. Their team is brutal. I thought Marc-Edouard Vlasic retired 10 years ago. I don't know how he's still like their number one defenseman. I don't get it. He was like their third defenseman when they were nasty in like 08-09. Now he's the number one defenseman in 2023. I just don't get what's going on there. So yeah, the Sharks are going to be pretty tough. As for my conference picks, Scott, I really liked yours. In the spirit of not just choosing yours, I elected to go a different route. And I have the Devils winning the East and the Stars winning the West, and I have the Stars winning the Cup. I think they got a great combo of grit, skill, youth, star power, pun intended, and of course, veteran leadership. So, and then the Devils, I think there's a lot to be not a lot, but there's left to be desired on their back end, but especially compared to like the Hurricanes. But as we've known, oftentimes, most of the time when you pick the team that's supposed to win, they don't. So I feel like the Hurricanes will just find a way to lose more so than the Devils finding a way to win. But I do think that, obviously Jack Hughes is a star on the rise. He's not on the rise. He's there. He's just going to get better and better. I like Andre Palat there. I like, Nico Hischier and Dawson Mercer. And, they just got, good depth all the way around. Luke Hughes in the back end. Let's see what he does for a first full year. So, as I said, Scott, I liked your picks for the conference champions and the Cup champion, but to change it up, I just went with the Stars and Devils, and the Stars winning it.
Yeah, so I'll give my picks now, but yeah, I have Hurricanes winning the East, Oilers winning the West, Hurricanes winning the Cup. I just look at that Hurricanes team, and it's like, obviously they've been building for a while. They've been consistently good. They've just never put it over the finish line. I look at this team and I'm like, if it's not going to be this year, then like when would it ever be? They already had one of the best defenses in the NHL, and then they went out and signed Dmitry Orlov. They have Andrei Svechnikov healthy again up front after, obviously they lost him down the stretch last year, and that was a pretty devastating injury. They went out and added Michael Bunting, who brings, some nastiness, some prickliness that I think that team was lacking a little bit. Obviously Svechnikov's physical, but Bunting he helps like change the attitude a little bit, and he'll do something dumb at some point. We saw that in Toronto, but I think having a guy like that, because he's also a good player, can help that lineup. They're still just really deep, just all around, and I feel like, I just think they're the best team on paper. Their goaltending, they don't have like a clear stud, but between Freddie Anderson, Ani Rana, the kid Pyotr Kochetkov. Like, I think they can piece it together enough there. And as for Edmonton, I sort of feel the same way about, like, if not now, when? Like, you still have the extremely high end talent up front. They added Connor Brown, who's, coming off an injury season, but could be a real nice addition. You have a full season of Matthias Ekholm on the back end now. They've finally actually put together a pretty solid D-core. Stuart Skinner was good in net for them last year. So, I think Vegas, there could be a little bit of a cup hangover. They haven't, Mark Stone's banged up again already. They lost Riley Smith. Colorado, I'm still not sure about their depth, although I think they'll be very good. I do like Dallas a lot. That's a solid pick. But yeah, I'm going to go with Edmonton in the West.
And I was going to say, Brian, I know you have a hard out like in 2 minutes. Is there anything that you wanted to get out there before I give mine? I'll let you go and then hop off for your call.
Yeah, no, I'm good, Bridgette. You take it away. I've said everything I need to say, and I do want to hear what you have to say. And if I have to drop off, I'll drop off.
Okay, well, I'm not going to there's nothing groundbreaking with what I'm about to say because I hate predicting Stanley Cup winners. It is impossible. I don't even know why we go through the motions and the exercise of doing it.
You do a hockey podcast and it's required.
But listen, I'm not a gambler because I cannot see the future. And the NHL is so hard to predict that I will give you my on paper, but it just doesn't translate like that, right? So Carolina on paper should be incredible this year. You do not want to run into them in the first round. You do not want to be a wild card team and face them because I think you're in trouble. But we've seen what happened with the Bruins. People were saying that about them last year. On paper, they were the best team, and they didn't go very far. I really do like the talent on Carolina. I think they got a little bit of everything, like you were saying, Scott, grit, skill, guys that will push you off the puck. They got it all going on. But I still, for some reason, I cannot pick them to win the cup. I don't know what it is, but I just can't.
Are you about to pick Columbus versus Chicago in the finals? Is that what I'm hearing?
You nailed it. Yeah. So I'm gonna go with and see, here's the thing. Like, I feel like Colorado might have another good season this year. I don't think Vegas is going back to back. And so I guess I'll go with Colorado, but I do not feel super strongly about these predictions at all because I think maybe Bruins fans in general after last year know what I'm talking about, and we've all been burned before, so it's hard for me to choose.
Well, if Colorado ends up winning, I'm giving you zero credit because there's no conviction in that pick.
No, there wasn't.
Yeah, so
I would be honest here. You don't know, neither do I. So
no, I'm gonna remember that. I'm gonna give you no credit. Whereas if Carolina or Dallas wins, me or Brian get, we'll have to figure out some sort of celebration to.
One team that nobody picked was the Bruins. So of course, this might be the year where they actually surprise everybody when there's no expectations.
I was gonna say I did. Yeah, I did pick them last year and feel at least somewhat responsible for cursing them. So couldn't do it again.
The curse of the Bambino and the Billy Goat curse and the McLaughlin curse. Those are the three biggest curses in sports. Did either of you have any other takeaways before I have to get out of here?
Xerxes, I thought he had a takeaway, but he said he bit me.
I thought he was going to have a better cup pick than you.
I thought so too. I don't know.
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Well, if that's the case, thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you very soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.